Join us today as we read from Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 31. So we see the sixth day, God creating man.
Yeah, it says that God created man in his image. So what do you think that means?
Well, let me say I don't know what that means exactly, and I will turn to John Piper. He has two articles which he speaks about the image of God, and some of the things that he says with the information about the features of the creation unique to man, we can conclude that man is in the image of God, and that means as a whole person, both physically and spiritually. That is, in some sense, he is like his maker. I guess physically we can say God has a, I don't want to say the wrong things here. I was going to say God has hands, but
well, there are some places in the Psalms that talk about God wrapping us in his arms or his arm being swift to move. So, I mean, there's no way for us to know. Only Moses, who saw God, would be able to know exactly what God looks like from behind. But, so it's hard to know if that's like poetically in some way we look like God or literal. Mm-hmm. But there is some sort of connection because God describes himself using our body parts sometimes.
Yeah, I like how you said it in terms of he wraps us in his arms, and even he runs towards us. Mm-hmm. He sees us. He listens to us.
Yeah,
and that's all our physical makeup as human beings. But then the second part is the spirituality, which I think most people talk about. That God is spirit. Mm-hmm. And us as human beings, we also have a spirit. And also as a result of this image in us, we have dominion over all the earth. In the same way that God has dominion over the earth, he gave us that dominion. Mm-hmm. In fact, that is stated clearly in verse 28, where it says,
fill the earth.
Yeah, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth.
Yeah, I think another way that I've heard people talk about the image of God and how humans reflect that image is that of a painting. So if we were to go to see a beautiful mountain and lake and I decided to paint it, I would be painting a representation of the lake and mountain onto a canvas. You wouldn't be able to climb the mountain I had painted or to swim in the lake that I had painted. So you couldn't experience it to the full extent of the actual mountain and lake. So I've heard people explain the way that man is in the image of God is similar to the way the painting reflects what was actually painted. Mm-hmm. So it has similar characteristics, perhaps similar shape, perhaps a similar feeling being portrayed, but it doesn't have the same characteristics. It doesn't have the same quantifiable things.
Mm-hmm. Part of what scares me a little bit is I hear people talk about little gods, that because we are in the image of God, we are sort of like little gods, which I do not think is true.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how, like you said, in verse 28, we see God giving humans dominion. So we do have a sense of power and authority that God has given to us. Mm-hmm. But we're not the same as God. We're not on the same level.
We're not.
And
Yes.
so, even as much as we might be transformed by the Holy Spirit into the image of Christ more and more, we're not going to be perfect this side of heaven. And so as imperfect beings, we cannot achieve the same level that God is.
Yes. And even when we get to heaven, I don't think we're still not going to be on the same level as God.
Mm-hmm. I think the term that I've heard used is vice regents.
Vice regents, what does it mean?
It's just a term to describe having authority, but an authority that's given by someone else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
this study Bible is saying the word Adam was a Hebrew generic term for mankind, which later became a proper name, Adam. But initially it just meant mankind in general.
Appropriate, since he was the first man.
So he was the first Adam. I guess that's what it means. He was the first Adam. Eve was the second Adam. If we're talking of the generic term for mankind.
I don't know if it works that way.
That's what it says.
Because it's like Eve was a pair, like a helper to Adam.
As we shall see in the near future, they were not made at the very same time.
Yes.
It was Adam first and then Eve second. So Eve was the second being.
But God had made all the animals of their kind. And so Eve was of Adam's kind.
Yes, exactly. So she was the second Adam.
Maybe it's that term that's throwing me off, since I've only ever heard it used to describe Jesus.
When you describe Jesus, it doesn't say, it said the last Adam was Jesus. Yeah, the last Adam.
Last Adam?
Yep.
What? Why does it say second man? Okay, anyways. You're right. I know we'll talk about this coming soon, but I think it's good to note in verse 27 that God also created man and woman, male and female.
Which was, I guess, the way he had been creating everything from the beginning. That it was male and female, male and female. Oftentimes, even me, I also tend to forget this, that Eve was created on the sixth day. At times we tend to think, oh, Eve was later, an afterthought, after a few months, few days, few weeks. But in actual fact, she was created on the sixth day.
Today, in modern times, there's different conversations about gender. Even with the two sexes, even in modern days, there are individuals who might have abnormalities, so they fall into a different category. But I think we can see here that that is not how God created the world to be. When we see cases like that, we can know that that isn't how God created it. Not that it reflects on it doesn't mean someone's a worse person because they don't fall into those two categories. But we can just see here what was God's original plan or blueprint for humanity.
So verse 31, we see something, God says something which he had been saying in all the other days, when after he created something, and he would say, that is good. And it just shows how God is a perfect God who creates good things. He wants us to have good things. That's a question or a worrisome in most people's lives. I mean, I guess including mine. As times I struggle with it. Pastor JP was talking about this today in church about suffering. You know why God allows suffering, and yet when He created everything, everything was good. And
actually, in this verse, not just good, but humans were very good.
Yeah.
So the pinnacle of creation.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully in the next chapter or next few chapters, we'll be able to find out, what happened. If God created everything and everything was good, so what happened? What changed?
Because we're not good right now.
We're not good right now. We're in a bad shape, in a bad state. I saw something which we had written earlier on here. Features of the creation narrative which are unique to man. And the first point being man is the final creation. And 2, he's the only one who is stated as being in the image of God. 3, only man is given dominion over all the earth. And 4, prior to the creation of man alone was there divine counsel. We spoke about that when God said, let us create man. And then 5, only man is explicitly stated as being created, male and female. Oh, I was actually wrong. That's
Let's check that out.
5. Only man is explicitly stated as being created male and female. God made but one male and one female, that all the nations of men might know themselves to be made of one blood, descendants from one common stock, and might thereby be induced to love one another. I actually think these 5 points sort of go hand in hand with how we are in the image of God and how God cares so much for human beings. I mean, he cares for all his creation, but I think he puts more care and he loves us so much to the point that he actually came to die for us as human beings.
I guess it also shows the care that we should also give to other people. Because Jesus talked about how loving God and loving each other was so important. And we can see in these verses how important humans are to God. It's pretty radical, too, that the Bible is teaching here that every human is made in the image of God. I think sometimes it's easy to separate people who are seemingly other than you as less than, right? Well, they don't follow the same political party. They're not from the same country. They don't have the same color as me or whatever else. But God is saying that actually every person is made in his image. This might be a little controversial to say too, but
Which part?
I know that Americans are really obsessed with their pets these days. So I think this is important to remember too, that we have an important role to take care of animals, but they aren't at the same level as humans. I think sometimes people can go a little bit overboard with just where they personally view their pets.
Yeah. I think, there's nothing wrong with loving your cat or loving your dog. But if it reaches a point where I think you give it more care, more than the next human being, then probably it's gone overboard. But the fact that God created those dogs, those cats, those kangaroos, it means God wants us to take care of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And I guess that also includes not only pets, all animals, all vegetation, fish underwater. We need to put care into that. But there just has to be a balance in that man is in the image of God, and so he is on a higher level than an animal.
It reminds me of an example you gave one time at the zoo. Do you mind if I share that?
I don't remember that. Was I sober when I said that?
I think we were talking about conservation, because the zoo was trying to raise money for conservation. And I think it was in an area of the world that you are very familiar with. And they were trying to say at the zoo about how, so many of whatever type of animal are being killed by humans. And we have to put a stop to that. So please give money to help this.
Yeah.
But your point was that, actually the humans in that part of the world are dying from hunger. And so perhaps these initiatives to save the animals would actually also be killing humans.
Yeah.
So, obviously the best solution is peace for everyone, including animals. But that's just an example of a time when someone was putting the health of these animals above the health of the humans from that area. Because the only way we heard the humans talked about was in a pretty demoralizing way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, those bad people that hunt and kill the poor animals.
Yeah.
It was just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. The moment the animals get more preference than the human beings, then we're missing it.
Yeah.
Because man was made in the image of God, and he has dominion over all the earth.
Yeah, I was going to say another controversial thing too.
Yeah, I know. Genesis 1 has
So many
so many
controversies.
controversies. Actually, once we passed Genesis 1, you realize, oh, there's no more controversies.
The path smooths out.
Mm-hmm.
Until, what is it, Genesis 7?
Which one?
Before the flood. The flood chapter.
I see.
That has some more controversy.
Yeah, Noah.
With the sons of God, the daughters of men.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I think it's interesting reading verse 28 about being fruitful and multiplying. I think sometimes people take that to mean having children, and some Christians would even say having a lot of children. But I think because humans are spiritual and physical people, I think that God actually had a lot more in mind than just physical making and multiplying. I think there's an aspect of spiritual multiplying that we often forget about, that the purpose of families is to multiply in many ways God's kingdom. So that could be through procreation,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it also could be through intensive discipleship that couples are able to do that perhaps some other people in different stages of life would not be able to do.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, but also we don't want to undermine the physical aspect.
That's true. Yeah.
That God wanted the earth to physically grow with many people,
Mm-hmm.
because it was only Adam. It's very interesting that at that time he was just one person, and now we're talking of 6 billion or 7 billion now.
A lot of billions.
A lot of billions. 6 is a lot. but yeah, so definitely God wanted Adam to be multiplying the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another debate which can come is, does God still want us to multiply now?
Yeah. When
Now,
is it filled?
but yeah, but I mean that we might never know, because we are not, we don't own the earth as much as we have dominion, but we don't know what
The limits are set by
what are
God.
the limits. Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. I think we'll see this theme come back later with the Tower of Babel. But God wanted them to fill the earth, not just fill the Garden of Eden, not just fill one region,
Mm-hmm.
but he actually wanted the whole earth to be filled with human beings that would be stewarding his creation and praising him.
Mm-hmm.